I was born in Southport in 1923, the youngest of 5 children. I was still at school when war broke out, and using my credits in physics and chemistry, and I went to Oxford to read organic chemistry. Whilst I was at Oxford, I joined the University Air Squadron, but I was assessed as suitable for pilot training. There was a glut of trained pilots and there weren't any postings available. Eventually, when I did get a posting to a squadron, it turned out to be an anti-aircraft cooperation squadron, which was training anti-aircraft gunners with dummy targets to practice their tracking and gun laying on. At this time, I was still in the Royal Air Force, flying Meteor 3s, which were the fastest jet fighters then in service. On a low flying exercise, I managed to take my clockwork 9.5mm pathoscope cine camera to the gun site and shot these pictures over North Devon, following the railway line towards Barnstaple. On special occasions we used to land them in VICs of 3 on a 150-foot wide runway, but on this occasion we were more usually landing in pairs. The picture of me sitting in a Spitfire at the Battle of Britain Memorial flight at Coningsby was taken during a visit there, and I worked out that it was almost 60 years to the day when I sat in the cockpit of the same Mark V Spitfire at North Weald prior to my first exciting solo in a Spitfire. So when I came back to this country, I went to see the guide dogs for the Blind Association. They said, right, well fine, as soon as you're demobbed, come and join us and you can learn to be a guide dog trainer. That's where I met my wife Vivian, who was also working at the Guide Dog Centre. Unfortunately, although it was a very rewarding occupation, and it was only paying 30 shillings a week or something as an honorarium, so I went back to my wartime career and went into air traffic control. This photo was taken of me when I was Master of the London Lodge of the Guild of Air Traffic Control Officers in the early 1970s. My uncle introduced me to this hobby of filmmaking when he gave me, when I was 11, this 1920s Baby Pathy hand-turned cine camera, 9.5mm. And I made many films with this, using the out-of-date stock. I got a lot of films of the family looking like The Dark Cat in the Coal Hole, but later on when I bought new stock I made some quite surprisingly adequate films. And it says you turn 2 times per second, that's what you have to do. You look through this clear viewfinder. The camera came complete with its 1920s folding tripod. Although developed in 1920, this camera had quite advanced Pathy cassette loading. My next step forward at the ripe old age of 14, having got interested with the Baby Pathy camera, was to buy for £3.14 a second-hand clockwork motor camera. Took the same cassette, then you were able to wind it up, and so it was much easier to hold steady when you weren't having to turn it. To an Admirer twin turret, standard 8 camera. I became very dissatisfied with the quality of VHS after it was edited and copied, and so we moved to High 8, and so it's now replaced by the modern digital technology, a very small camera. The Baby Pathy camera came a hand-turned 9.5mm projector, lit by a 12-volt bulb from a car battery, which also turned 2 times per second to project the films from the camera, and with that I built a cinema in the attic of my parents' home. The first films I took with a camera were of course just family films. The first really serious film I made was with 2 colleagues when the school was evacuated or transferred to the Athol Palace Hotel at Pitlochry. The great trek began, and the school started its long journey north. Through the night and through the day, the trains rattled haltingly on. Do you remember, as each train moved north, it picked up a succession of parties for the Lees School Pitlochry. In 1970, we moved to Farnham, and I became a member of the Farnham Lions, and in that connection, the Lions started a 50-50 shop, which was a charity exercise which raised money, half of which went to the Farnham Lions local charity account and half went to the Royal Commonwealth Society for the Blind to run eye camps for restoring sight to blind villagers in India. And in that connection we had the opportunity to go and visit the eye camps in India to see the work in action that we'd been funding. So I took with me at that time my trusty Super 8 silent camera. There was much film as I thought we could possibly need and pointed at everything that happened as we were there. They just had a visit from an inner wheel lady from Windermere who actually herself was a doctor who'd come to see the work of the eye camps in action. And she had written this poem that what impressed her about this was that when a blind Indian villager got his sight back in a cataract operation, it wasn't just a personal miracle for him, it was also a miracle for the family, because it restored a useless blind person to an active member of the family able to help with the garden and the animals and whatever else, and freed the grandson from the chore of leaving Grandpa around. And it was this aspect of the iCamp programme which had appealed to her. And so she had written this poem, which she played to us, recorded by an Indian actor to Indian music. And we were so impressed with this, I was most moved by it. We were in a fairly emotional state, having been exposed to the enormous disparity between the very rich and the very poor in India and the caste system and all that. And this sudden inspiration of hope brought out by the Indian eye camps had caused this poem to be written and recorded. And I thought to myself, that would make a super soundtrack for a film. And I had never before made a film to fit a soundtrack. We usually make the film first and create the soundtrack afterwards, because of course we were using silent cameras, there was no live recording. So wherever we went for the next 3 weeks all over India, I pointed the camera at everything that moved, and before we came back to edit 4 different films for different audiences, I went through all that footage and selected bits which would illustrate this poem which the lady had written from Windermere. And it's called 5 Fingers because if you are trying to find out whether an uneducated person can see, it's no use showing them a chart with letters on it. You have to say, how many fingers have I got? And if they can tell you 5 fingers, you know that they can see. So this film was called 5 Fingers, and I think it's the most effective film I've ever made because it went the rounds of all the Lions clubs in England, and I took it on talks in my capacity as a voluntary speaker for the Royal Commonwealth Society for the Blind, which is now subsequently called Sight Savers International. And that film and the other film I made to go with it have raised thousands and thousands of pounds for eye camps in India.
Impression after an eye camp. A small warm hand in mine, my safety, my guide. A cry from rolling, laughing children. Come, come, laugh with us. I feel, down the arm ending in my hand, a silent shrug.
I entered the film into the Surrey Film Festival, which was just newly starting then, and it won a prize instantly, and it also got the chairman of the film festival to ask where I'd come from and where I arrived. And when I told him I just moved to Farnham, he said, well, we haven't got a club in Farnham area, would you like to start one? So when I retired, we actually did start one, and it was then called the Surrey Border Filmmakers. So I put a letter in the Farnham Herald and invited anybody who was interested in forming a cine club to contact me, and the result was we had 7 or 8 people who met in our living room at Glenside to have a look and talk about whether we should start a club. The result of that was we decided that we would start one, and 5 members joined it then and there, and from there on we've just gradually grown until we've been up to about 50 or 60 members, mostly husbands and wives, some of whom both make films. Most of the people that joined the club joined because they'd been making films themselves and they wanted to find better ways of editing their holiday films and so on. And one of the early activities we did in the club, and have done ever since, was to have a film in an evening, where we put groups of members together into groups of 5 or 6. And set them to make a film in 2 hours and show it half an hour later to the club on a given theme. And for the first time, people have joined in making film as a group, found it very satisfying, very rewarding, not having to do everything yourself, from dreaming up the script to filming it and editing it and commenting on it yourself. Found that the joint activity of a team making a film was something very interesting, and very often those groups which were first put together to do film in an evening stayed together and made films together for years. The very first of around 500 talking newspapers to be set up in this country, the Farnham and Alton Talking Newspaper, now known as FATN Talking News, has been recording and distributing local news for the blind and visually impaired in the Surrey and Hampshire borders since 1971. As each reader approaches the end of their article, they signal to the presenter, who switches the live microphone to the next reader. The engineer constantly monitors and adjusts the microphone gain to ensure the optimum recording quality.
Thanks to all the fantastic work of the volunteers at the Farnham Talking Newspaper.
One of my activities is giving a show of club films to the residents at Clare Park, where I live, every 3 months. And in addition to including films made by club members, I also put together a newsreel of things that have been going on round and about Clare Park, using what I call my video diary technique, which is I carry the camera everywhere and shoot whatever I think looks interesting, and often, if there's no background sound, comment to the camera about what I'm taking and why, which helps me to put the commentary together after editing. Just occasionally I'll include the original comments that came with the film, and if I carefully balance the volume levels correctly, it's very hard to tell which is the original comment and which is the commentary added afterwards. What I find exciting now about the club is the influx of wonderfully creative and productive new members. although the membership changes over time, the ethos of the club continues, and I'm really delighted to see how well it's going at the moment. Thank you.
As you've just seen, Sir Paul was as natural in front of the camera as he was behind. I've returned to Clare Park after exactly 2 years since I made that documentary to pay tribute to Sir Paul. I was shocked, as most of you are, to learn about Sir Paul's demise on the 22nd of June of this year. Very sad news indeed. He was remarkably active in the club. For last July, he won the documentary competition with his entry, Spitfire Restoration, filmed at a factory in Aldershot. It was part of one of his favourite ongoing projects. In December, he won the Best Commentary Prize in our December competition. No surprise there. And in January, he wrote 2 articles for Border Post. What a dynamo of activity. Sir Paul loved film festivals, and in particular, he would always attend Surrey each year. We met up this April in Tonbridge, and he told me that his opinion of the winner never seemed to agree with the judge's opinion, but that's Sir Paul. He led the pioneers and guided us in our filmmaking, and I remember when I first joined the club, he was very kind in pulling me over to one side and saying, "Colin, come and join us. I'll show you all there is to know about filmmaking." And in a way he did. He was most courteous, kind, with endless patience and kindness. And we last met together as a pioneers group back in April, at a local pub of course, over lunch, to discuss scripts for the movie in a month idea. Sir Paul gave a lot of his time to SBMM committee work and general advice. Above all, Sir Paul was a true gentleman and a friend. He will be sadly missed by all members of our film club. Rest in peace, Sir Paul.